I'd like to welcome you guys to this week's video. If you're wondering why I'm all bundled up, it's because it's freezing cold here in my garage studio, and it's raining outside, so if you hear background noise, that's what's going on. This weather we're having this week is not too favorable, but the good news is this too shall pass, and we'll be able to go fishing again soon. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about fishing breakwaters, jetties, and riprap, and kind of give you an overview of what's happening and how to approach those things from your own boat, or even a kayak, or whatever you're fishing them from. So I do a lot of fishing around the Long Beach breakwall, which includes the Federal Wall, the Long Beach Wall, and the Middle Wall, I guess. The three sections of the breakwall here. And I did some research years ago into the composition of the breakwall, and just to get a better idea of what we're looking at. And as it turns out, what we're seeing above the water line is really just the tip of the proverbial iceberg, because the breakwall extends out quite a bit more than you would imagine, and has actually several different types of rocks involved with its construction. So let's take a look at this image here of the Long Beach breakwater. They started out with a sand core, and then they put some larger stone above that, and then some bigger stone above that, and then they built it up with an even larger stone to the top. This Class A stone is the stuff that you see sticking out of the water. So while you might think the breakwall is completely composed of the stuff you see sticking out of the water, truth is a lot of the stuff that's lower is much smaller rock. And also the breakwall is not a pyramid, it's more of a off angle, so the side that faces the ocean slopes out a lot more to take the pressure off those waves, where the inside stuff is a lot steeper. And that inside stuff being steeper is very similar to the riprap that there is in protected waters. So basically the rocks are put there to keep the shoreline from eroding, and the less water movement there is, the steeper the rock stacks are. So if you're fishing, like let's say in Long Beach Inner Harbor or somewhere in San Diego Bay, those rocks are not going to stick out as nearly as far of an angle as they would on a jetty that's, like let's say the Wedge, or the Long Beach breakwater, or the one down in San Diego, and that. So the ones that face the open ocean are going to have more slope to them, as opposed to the stuff that's inside the harbor is going to be steeper. And the reason that's important to know is that you have to fish them differently based on the composition of the structure you're fishing, and I'll get into that a little bit more in a second here. But breakwalls are another piece of superstructure, like I've mentioned before, that does not have fish everywhere on it. There's a ton of fish on it, but you need to find those fish. And, I used to think when I first started fishing a breakwall on my own boat that, oh, I have this rock here that's a certain way, and I always go fish by that. And sometimes they're biting, sometimes they're not. That's my spot. And I see a lot of people do that same thing. They'll just sit up on one spot on the breakwall and just sit there and pound at. Very low percentage play to do that, I've found. Just like anything else, there's bass traveling up and down that breakwall. They use it as one continuous piece of structure, and they are going around and feeding. What I have found is that there are certain areas of the breakwater that are the most likely they're the highest percentage spots, and those spots can be identified very easily if you go out regularly and you see birds sitting on the rocks or in the water near a certain spot on any of these riprap areas. Those birds are there because the bait fish are going to be there. The bait fish are there because something's putting a thumb over the hose right there and creating the eddies that trap the plankton. A lot of times that could be just a deviation of the breakwall below the surface. There may be an extra pile of rocks there. It may be uneven. Maybe they dumped some rocks incorrectly, and that causes those things to aggregate. And a tip that I share with people in regards to island fishing, when you're fishing, boiler rocks for calico bass, if you want to find the area that calico bass are going to be, look for the areas that have bird poop on the rocks above it more than other places, because that's where those birds are sitting, and they're sitting there for the same reason the bass are going to be there. That being said, the birds aren't always where the bird poop is, and the bass aren't always where the birds are, but hitting those higher percentage areas is a much better play. Now, when you're fishing these types of riprap, the important thing to understand is that you need to cover water. If you got a trolling motor, you know, you can use that. I don't have a trolling motor on my boat currently. So I'll normally sit up in a direction that the wind's going to blow me along that wall. And I will, you know, just jockey the boat ahead as we're fishing to keep covering water. And as you saw in my video about fishing spotted bay bass, you're doing the same thing at the break wall, except you're going on the straight line. And if there's biting bass there, you're going to get bit the first or second cast. So if I'm getting, you know, let's say I pull up to the break wall, it looks good, I see some birds, or I mark some bait on my meter, I make a couple casts, no bites, I'll move the boat a cast length. Make a couple casts, no bites, move to cast length. Then as you start to get bites, you can slow it down and make multiple casts in the same zones and kind of work an area thoroughly. And I'm going to talk more about this when it gets to techniques and presentations and stuff, but what I found over the years is when fishing the outside of the break wall, if you're going to be fishing a bait like a crankbait, or if there's kelp there, a weedless swim bait, you should be casting parallel to the wall, or as parallel to the wall as possible. A lot of times there's a big swell, so you can't really get parallel, but you can cast at a 45-degree angle ahead of the boat and work the bait back that way. A lot of times, especially with a crankbait, those fish will bite the bait a good distance away from the wall. But if you're pardon me, if you're fishing any type of bait with a lead head on it, you're going to want to fish perpendicular to the wall and let that bait fall down the wall. And to do that, you have to fish slower. If the boat's moving, you can bomb cast ahead and work it back to the boat. But if you're fishing straight at the wall, perpendicular, you need to have a chance to work your bait down straight back to you, so it's not back behind you. You rarely get bites when your when your boat is passing up your bait in that presentation. And like I said, I'm not really here to talk about the specific presentations. I'll do that in another video. But water movement's a big thing at the wall. You know, on some days there's swell and it's breaking everywhere. Some days it's calm and it's only, you know, breaking up against the wall at a few spots. If you can find those spots where there's water movement and turbulence, the savvy bass is going to be in that area if there's, you know, not water moving everywhere, because there's a better chance of bait fish getting blown into the wall by that. And, you know, as far as, you know, there's always swells. You know, fishing any kind of break wall or jetty or huge rock structure is can be dangerous. So don't go above your comfort level. But, you know, if you want to get used to it, start practicing on the inside of the wall, and don't, or on a protected riprap area or something like that, and get used to having your boat, maneuvering your boat close to rocks like that. So I've got a couple of pictures here that I'm going to be talking about, so I want to, pardon me, go through them here. So this, when I talk about irregularities in jetties and stuff, or riprap of any kind, or break walls, this photo really illustrates that really well. This is a spot somewhere here in, I'm not going to say where. A lot of guys, if you know it, you know it. But there's always a lot of big bass caught in this particular zone, and as you can see here, this riprap is very uneven. There's these out-jutting piles of concrete, and those piles of concrete change the current that goes in, and there's a lot of current in that zone. So that creates eddies that will aggregate those fish. I think this shot kind of illustrates that pretty well. So, you know, as I said, when you're fishing the break wall, if you're fishing a moving bait, you want to fish it at a 45-degree angle or straight off the bow of the boat. If you're fishing a lead-headed bait that you're working down the wall, you want to fish it perpendicular to the wall. Any riprap that you find inside of harbors is going to be extremely steep. And it's just protecting erosion. It's not dealing with swell, so it's not dealing with any of that stuff. Now my computer's going haywire. Anyway, so when you're fishing that riprap inside of a harbor, you're going to need to keep your boat pretty close to the rocks and cast parallel to it. The good news is, even if the rocks end here, you could be 5 feet away and be in safe water. You know, as long as the wind's not blowing you in there, you can basically just run that boat just 10 feet off the riprap and make casts parallel to it. And because it's so much steeper, those fish tend to hang tighter to that rock. So, you know, whatever bait you want to fish, I always like to fish a moving bait a fast moving bait like a crankbait is an ideal thing, or a spinnerbait, or you guys like to throw the A-rig or whatever, that would be a good choice along that riprap. And you know, if you go to a place like Long Beach, there's miles and miles and miles of this riprap, and there are very few fish to be found in 90% of it on any given day. So you're going to have to look, and that means you're going to have to drive, stop, make a few casts, observe conditions, move to something different. And you know, since it's all at different angles and stuff like that, you could say, you know, hey, let me try this, let me try that, and then maybe try and figure out a pattern. And you know, a good example is the oil islands that are in Long Beach Harbor. There's, I think, 4 of them. And I usually find that the bass, are, if they're biting, they're going to be biting on one of the 4 corners of or one of the 4 sides of those oil islands. And more often than not, they're biting on the wind-blown side. It's just like a freshwater lake where bass are feeding on bait fish that the wind is pushing up against the shoreline. And the bait fish, I don't think are getting blown up there by the wind, but the wind is causing this turbulence, which is aggregating plankton, which is attracting these bait fish, and it attracts the bass just like it. So if you're looking for stuff, you know, wind-blown shoreline, I mean the wind blowing into it or parallel to it is going to be the what you're looking for. Current, you know, has a big factor, but you know, you really need to drive around a lot and look for stuff. And oh, I have a thing set incorrectly here. Bear with me. I had some other things I want to cover here. For a second here, my internet's really slow in the garage this afternoon, or morning, whatever it is. Yeah, so I was talking about, you know, finding fish in riprap areas of extended stuff. You're going to find that there are patterns that you'll develop as you go along with that. So anytime you pull up at a break wall, at a jetty, at riprap, at an oil island, at any of these types of things that have riprap around them, even, you know, whether you're fishing with spotted bay bass, calicos, or sand bass, or a mix of all 3, you're looking for a differentiation in the structure itself, variations in it that will cause turbulence, which can attract bait fish. If you identify these areas, and as you do this for a while, you start to know certain areas on this tide or this swell direction or anything like that, you can find these spots and take advantage of that and track that and look at your fish finder and see what's happening. Is there bait fish? What's going on when you're getting bites? And then you'll be able to start adding that up and putting those pieces together and developing patterns that you can go out there and you can run your stretch of spots and get a pretty good idea based on how the conditions are, what's biting or what's not going to bite. And so yeah, as far as baits go and everything else, we'll talk about that next week. But you know, it's while we have this poor weather here, it's not. I wouldn't go out today, but you know, even if it's blown out after this and the water temps drop dramatically, you know, there's plenty of protected areas you can go in your local bay or harbor that has riprap. And you know, if you just go grab a crankbait or a swim bait or whatever you like to fish and just practice moving your boat along these areas and finding fish, they'll usually bite better than fish outside do after a storm. So give it a try, and this will, you know, help you. Well, it may seem like a minor thing, just learning about this will help you identify fish patterns that are going to help you once you get outside of the harbor here and spring and summer come into play. So that's about it for this week here. I think I'm going to talk about tackle and techniques next week. But I hope you guys all have a great weekend and stay dry and safe.